Hello all, this is Joshua Spodek with my column here at Psychology Today. It's new. Hara Estroff Marano is Psychology Today's editor-at-large, and she has been for something like 20 years. From our first meeting, which wasn't that long ago, we talked about hot-button issues, the sort of things that social media attacks people for. We neither argued nor agreed, we just talked and learned from each other, and I think I can speak for both of us to say that we were intrigued by each other's conversation. Though I focus on environmental leadership, leadership to me overlaps with education, learning, social and emotional skills, influence, persuasion, and many other things that overlap with psychology. Besides editing at Psychology Today, Hara focuses on education, learning, social and emotional skills, and more. She invited me to write at the magazine, kind of unexpectedly. I told her that writing alone felt limiting. I already write on my blog, I wrote for Inc. for a long time, I write in various places. Could I podcast? Could I organize events? Could I create in-person community? These were the sorts of things that I call leadership that I wanted to do. She said the magazine wouldn't do these things, but our conversations kept engaging us. Eventually, based on these conversations and her support for me writing on these things, I agreed to write, and we also decided to record our conversations for Psychology Today's audience. We didn't know where we would put it. The magazine won't yet host podcasts, but I can store the audio in a video and post it, which I presume is how you're listening to it now. In a way, we've created Psychology Today's first podcast. Hara and Josh tackle hot-button issues. Our first starts with environmental leadership, then moves to education and other areas of A Nation of Wimps, her book. Without further ado, for the first time of many, here are me and Hara. Joshua Spodek and
Hara Marano.
And we are here in the offices of Psychology Today in, I guess, Midtown Manhattan, Nomad maybe. We have had amazing conversations. When you asked me to write for Psychology Today, I asked, can I do a podcast? Can we do other things? You said, no, all we can do is do stories or blogs, but we can post audio. And so we're going to have one of our conversations right now. You're about to say...
Yes, so, I've been very taken with your approach to environmental issues, how committed you are in a way that doesn't make other people feel stupid or bad or guilty. I love your approach of doing what you can. Initially, I thought, not that it was a fool's errand, but that I thought maybe that, well, that's nice. That's nice for you. Good. Uh-huh. I'm glad that you can do it. I'm glad someone is doing it. But what I've come to see in the past couple of months is the message of climate change has become so...
Sorry to interrupt. Let's say environment, because there's more than climate change. There's deforestation
Yes, there's much more. But I think it's the climate change issue that has the incredible urgency. And I think people tie deforestation to a negative impact on climate change. Certainly it reverses the positive effects in the atmosphere. But what I think that somehow this message that this is all tied together is so dire that I think people are getting the message that, oh my God, we're really in terrible straits. I've got to do anything that I can. And so I think the time is right for you and your leadership on this issue. I think people need to know a way and be shown a way, because I think people are ripe for the message. I can't believe there is a sentient creature who does not now understand the urgency of environmental issues. I mean, maybe the dolt in the White House, but that's an exceptional human being but I think that this message is getting through. There's just a sense like, oh boy, we are really at the critical, past the critical stage.
I think I've walked you through the process of starting something. There's so many people that I'm like juggling of like what challenge they've taken on. You're doing one right now, right?
Right. I'm terribly conserving water in my own personal life. Just doing little things like not using paper towels as much.
That's the one that that we had over dinner.
Right. We decided at dinner, and using reusable materials to just clean around me.
Is that partly what triggered. You're right now speaking in a way that when we speak on in the past, you haven't been so focused, or I see you speaking with a purpose now.
Well, I think you're persuasive in the fact that individuals can make a difference, and that even if it's a small thing, you think it doesn't make a difference, but a million people doing small things, it's not small.
Wait, I'm going to cut you off there. That may be the case, but that's not my strategy. I don't find it compelling when people say, if everyone does a little bit, like if you don't use straws and a lot of people don't use straws, then that's a whole lot of straws saved. I'm not going to stop people from stop using straws.
Right.
But what I ask for is not for people to do things that are small or big. I find out what they care about, and I have them act on what they care about. If I do it effectively, then they do something meaningful for them and purposeful.
I understand that. Okay. I get the difference.
They don't.
But I think that there is a mindset among people that, the little things that I can do, even with joy and passion, and the things I do, I've chosen to do because I'm in the kitchen, I'm a cook, I'm a kitchen person, and these are things that are meaningful to me and things that I can do, and it matters to me, and it pleases me that I can make a difference in my kitchen, and I could do it a different way. But I think that for other people, the idea, the calculation, there's a calculus, I think, that, yes, I think there are a number of decisions that people have to make in order to do something, even including something that is a joyous change. And the calculus is that what I do has to matter. I think that you're very persuasive as an example, without even saying anything. You're persuasive as an example that doing something individual can make a difference. And I think the calculus people make is, oh my God, lots of people doing little things, not little anymore.
I think the calculus that most people make is, it's hard for me to say what most people think, because I think a lot of people, they see there's plastic all over the ocean. I'm getting a plastic cup of coffee at Starbucks. I think they know that this plastic, if they're lucky, it will get recycled, but it will most likely not be recycled. And it most likely won't even make it into the landfill. It'll probably end up in the ocean too.
Right.
And so they feel, if I really think about this, I'm going to feel pretty guilty. I don't want to go, guilt and shame, anxiety, these are emotions that, like when someone's happy, people are like, hey, I'm happy. I'm so happy. When people are angry, like, oh, I'm angry. Sometimes they'll not want to act angry, but they'll act like I'm not angry. We've all done that. Mm-hmm. But guilt and shame, these are things that we suppress. These are things that we feel like we don't want to show or feel. And so we move away from them.
Right, and people are defensive about them, and they would rather, and so they will be guilty and then be, it's a negative and uncomfortable feeling, I think and they become sort of bad about it, nasty about it to others.
I'm going to comment on, the listeners couldn't see your motion right there. They animate themselves. You
Yes.
busy your mind with other things.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the government should do this. Or, the corporation should do that. Or there should be a law or something like that. And then they're like, well, problem solved. Someone else is responsible. Someone else should do it. Meanwhile, I just have to do what the most convenient thing is for me. And that's really best. And the system should change. And I'm not part of the system. Or, I'm just some little part of the system. And I can't really change the system. And so they'll just keep doing what they're doing, feeling comfortable sleeping at night, knowing that someone else should do it, but absolving themselves of responsibility. But what I find, and why I accepted writing in psychology today, which is not the first place you'd think of writing about something about the environment, but the environment is not just about technology and systems, and it's also carbon dioxide has no volition of its own. It reacts to us. We have psychology. It's our behavior that it reacts to. Our behavior results from our emotions and our motivations. That's what's causing the environmental issues. It's our behavior coming from our beliefs. That's what I focused on over the past several years, is these are the causes that we can do something about. Technology reflects our values. And if we just make new technology and it's more efficient and innovation, but it reflects our protecting ourselves from feeling guilty, and our passions for growth and externalizing costs in order to profit maximally, then we're going to get more of the same, except faster, which is the opposite of what we want. Since the last time we spoke, I've realized something about personal action. A lot of people would say to me, Josh, you can not fly all you want. There's 7+ billion people out there. A lot of them are flying. If you don't fly, it doesn't make a difference. All you're doing is depriving yourself of Machu Picchu to no benefit to the world. Just go fly. Now, I hear there's some self-serving in there because they want to fly, and so they want to justify it. If someone else is not flying, that gums up their work, so they got to change that. So they want to motivate me to fly, or they want justification for them not to fly. I recognize if I don't fly, it's one part in billions, which is negligible. So I struggled with that for a while, and it occurred to me, I mentioned this in my second TEDx talk, I also don't steal. I don't expect that my not stealing will stop other people from stealing. I don't steal because it hurts people, and I don't want to hurt people. I don't kick puppies. I don't steal. And if the whole world stole, I like to think that I would still not steal. If the whole world kicked puppies, I think I would still like to not kick puppies. Chris Rock has a great routine on this, the comedian, and he's like, homeless people sometimes they'll say like, spare some change. At least I'm not stealing. I was like, you're not supposed to steal. You don't get credit for not stealing. That's not like a bonus. And so when people say, Josh, you're doing so much good, I'm like, I'm not polluting. That's not supposed to be good.
Yeah.
I don't want credit for that. I hope that becomes normal. In any case, I don't believe that my not polluting, I can't get my pollution to zero. I'm exhaling carbon dioxide as we speak. And literally.
Right.
I hope that people use me as a role model. That's nice, but I don't expect them to. And if people see me not flying or avoiding packaged food, if they follow, great, but I'm not doing this in order, that's not leading others. That is me living by my values. That improves my life. Simply living by your values, I think, will improve anyone's life because it forces you to struggle. What do I value more? What do I value less?
Right.
Do I value
all those choices? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And
minute
if you
by minute.
It's one thing to say I value clean air, clean water, clean land, but if every time push comes to shove between that value and any other value, that one loses. You got to look at your behavior. And when you actually, now if you decide, I don't care, that's your business. There's a lot of people out there, it's like, I want a jet, I want to go fly. There's Russian oligarchs who will fly a 747 from Russia to somewhere. Right. One person, on the plane, one passenger. I haven't met them yet. If they really don't care, I wouldn't have any levers to lead them with. Uh-huh. Because if they don't care, there's nothing they care. I'm not about coercion. I'm not about managing people. I'm about leading people. Well, management too, but leadership first. But for people who care, when you force yourself to live by the value, that actually behave according to these values, that improves your life. And I discovered that when I gave myself the challenge to avoid packaged food, I thought I'm going to have less variety. It's going to cost more. I'm going to have less. I used to like the fake meats from Trader Joe's, which are all packaged. And I was like, I'm not going to get those. But as it turned out, I like my life a lot more. That's a bonus that even if I didn't get it though, that my food now is more varied, it's cheaper, more accessible if I were in a food desert, it's more delicious.
And it's a principle you can apply anywhere. So it's in a way more versatile because you could be in any environment with with any basic food and use the same principles to survive on it. I mean, that's something that I think about a lot because I think we share that value of not using packaged food, making food from scratch. There's a sense that I could go anywhere and survive with the skills that I have of knowing the rudiments of using basic ingredients and not having to, oh my God, get to a store and get something already pre-processed or pre-packaged.
Yeah, and getting to know my farmers and walking the farms and seeing the vegetables that not only will I eat, but they will become me. Right. I don't want Twinkies to become me. Right. I don't want Starbucks milkshakes to become me. I want collard greens and legumes and lentils anyway. So there's what I do on my own, and that is for if you want to call it personal leadership, you can call it personal leadership, but that's just for me.
But I have a question for you.
Hold on, let me.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, separately from me doing what I believe is right for myself, and whether others follow me or not, that's their business. then I also do things to lead others. And that's the podcast, that's the book that's coming up, that's what we're doing now. That I presume, I hope to lead others. Now, I may be effective, I may not be effective. However, if I try to lead others to do something that I myself am not doing, I believe that I would have no credibility to lead from. And I think, or what leadership I would achieve would be to get other people also to tell other people what to do while they themselves don't do it, which is what I think people who would call themselves environmental leaders are doing. And
yeah, there are plenty of those people around.
There are only, to the extent that there's anyone purporting to lead on the environment, they're only doing that. They're only telling people to do something that they themselves are not doing. No one has actually tried to live sustainably, say by the Paris recommendations regarding the environment, to keep their emissions below a certain level. One flight round trip New York, LA, and you're over that if you heat your home for the year.
Right.
So they have not experienced the joy that you and I talked about with food, but with also all sorts of other things. And therefore they can't share the joy, and therefore they're telling people to do something miserable. And everyone's like, I don't want to do something miserable.
Right, you're not doing it. Yeah.
Right, and so they say, all right, what is this person actually doing? DiCaprio, Gore.
Right.
What they're actually doing is telling people to do something that they themselves are not doing. I will also tell people to do something that I myself am not doing. Now, I don't think that's leading, but not in the direction they think. I don't want to do that. I don't think simply by my trying to keep my emissions below the Paris recommendations, which I believe I am, that opens the door for me to lead. Without it, I don't have a leg to stand on. And so personal behavior is not the final answer for leading others, but it's at least a chance to lead others. And most people, it seems, do not care to lead in life. I'm not sure if they're readers of Psychology Today, but most people just tell me what to do. I don't know, with them, I hope they listen to the podcast and hear that I get increasingly well-known people, and when I get Oprah on the show, they'll say, yeah, I know Oprah. What's she doing? Okay, I'll do that. I hope that works out. But there are also people who want to lead, who say, this is not acceptable. This has to change, and I will do something to change it. And if they expect others to change, and they themselves don't change, they're dreaming. If they change themselves, then one thing is, then they have a chance at leading others. But what people don't get, which I've found only through experience, and I believe that only people will only find through experience, is that when you actually do this, you're going to love it. You're going to look at the ways that we're living today, the idea that you can fly wherever you want, whenever you want, just because you want to, with wanton disregard for how your behavior affects others, who are helpless to be affected by what you do. You will look at these systems and be sickened and disgusted at the entitlement, the spoiled rottenness of, I want to, therefore you can't do anything, like I get to. If we see it in others, in any other area of life, where we don't have a vested interest in but I want to see my uncle, then we get sickened by it. And we recognize that spoiled people don't recognize that they're spoiled. But we certainly don't want to be that way.
I think this is really a general principle that applies in lots of areas. I mean, I think of, all the devices that we're so wedded to, and of which we're the beneficiaries right now because we're recording on...
She's indicating the recording devices on the table in front of us.
Right. But, I mean, if you start looking at the technology that has enabled so much of what we can do, aside from the fact that it's a huge source of pollution. And what do people do with all their old devices and the mining that goes into getting the parts? When you start opening up and looking at what technology is bringing us, and how the part that I think is bad is our mindless acceptance and use of it. And that certainly has a lot of negative effects. I mean, I think that we're suffering for in the culture. So I think of what you're enumerating or describing as a principle that applies to every area, not just the environment. But for you, the question I have for you is, why can't you accept the fact that you do inspire people by what you do, by your own personal leadership? I mean,
I accept
just
it.
as it's inspired me.
That's to me gravy. It's nice to have, but I don't expect it.
Right.
I don't consider not kicking puppies to be an inspiration. I hope
No. I think that this is the way, one of the major ways psychology works, that you are an example. You're not setting yourself up as an example. I understand that. Mm-hmm. You're not setting yourself up as the paragon. But the fact that you're doing it, and doing it quietly, inspires other people to make that change. I mean, it's that very subtle transfer of, oh yes, I can do something analogous that makes me happy as well too. So don't overlook that factor.
There are a lot of people living more sustainably than me. People don't
It's
really
not
know
a
about
contest,
them.
though.
My point is that you don't know about them.
Right.
They might be doing it very quietly too. My techniques of putting it out there, of the active attempts to lead, using techniques, my role models, I have role models on the environment. B. Johnson, Dave Gardner, Rob Greenfield. Look these people up. They're doing things that I'm getting out of starting blocks. They're already doing things. That's for my personal behavior. But in terms of leadership, my role models are Gandhi, Dr. King, Mandela, Patton, Eisenhower, Lincoln. I believe that what I'm doing, following them, that's what's leading people to change. You look at Patton's speech to the Third Army. He's getting people to risk their lives. Many of them they have a good chance of dying. And they love what they're doing. I can't say for sure. I wasn't there. I haven't served. But if you read St. Crispin's Day, Henry V, he's inspiring people to, or Martin Luther King led people to go to jail for other people's freedom. This is not an obvious thing, that me going to jail would make someone else more free. We are not done we're not finished this one. But people did it willingly, enthusiastically. I would love to meet someone who went to jail in the 60s or 50s for civil rights, because I would like to know what they felt about it. Were they regrettably doing something? Were they doing something that they really don't want to, but they have to? Or were they engaged and inspired? Because I believe it was engaged and inspired.
I was married to one of them, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my second husband, absolutely. And yes.
And I want people to feel that way. And no one feels that way. Even Greta, who is the one person who's remotely trying to live sustainably, well, I think not remotely, I think she probably is calling for panic. Now, I don't like panic. I don't want to panic. Panic is what you do when you don't know anything better. And if you're 16 years old, there's certain life experiences that you can't have gotten by 16 years old. And however well she's doing now, I'm sure some people don't like what she's doing, but many people do. For the people who do like what she's doing, I know that by 32 and by 48, I'm doing my powers of 16.
Yeah, right.
That she will...
You memorize those well.
That she'll be more effective than what she is now. However effective she is now, she'll be more effective with more experience. But no one's getting it. It's the leadership stuff that I think that's what's making it more effective. I think that it's essential but not sufficient to behave that way oneself. But the crazy thing that no one gets, and this is something I'm really trying to get out there, that I don't think comes from Gandhi or King, or maybe it comes from Thoreau. It's great. It's glorious. By every standard that I can measure, it's a better life this way. At first I had to make my peace that there were people who live distant from me, who I may never see again. And there may be people that I love. But that's not a function of mine not flying. That's a function of it's a big world with more people than I can possibly spend time with. And I could love many, many people. At first I thought I was accepting that flying was going to take something away from me. But now it's realizing that flying was lulling me into believing that I could have more than I could, that I could see everything. A bucket list now I see that's a list of craving. That doesn't make my life better. That just makes me a tool for an industry that is profiting from something that pollutes heavily. Not having a bucket list and just saying, then you say, what is around me that I could see? And suddenly It's infinite. It's all accessible. It's everywhere around me, including relationships with people. A flight might bring me to someone distant, but flying in general makes people that I care about distant. Flying doesn't give me more time with family. It gives me less. It spreads me thin. It doesn't give me more time. And so the time that I have now, I spend with the people that I care about.
Right. Again, I want to say that your way of thinking about applying this in the realm of the environment, I mean, that's what's inspired you to think this way. But I think that the same thinking is something that everybody could benefit from in every domain of their life, because what you're doing is you're stripping away all the extraneous stuff, all the stuff we've been taught to believe is sexy and shiny and glorious and will bring us happiness. And I don't think you have to be in psychology today to realize we're living at a time where there are not a whole lot of people who can sit down and say they're happy despite all of these trappings. I mean, this is something I think about all the time because I want to get at that core of what is it that's keeping people from understanding what they have to do to be happy, from making the decisions, from exercising the values, or even knowing what their values are. Really, I mean, that's an exercise most people don't even do. I mean, they might be forced into making a choice at some critical moment in their lives, but that doesn't necessarily generalize into sitting down and thinking through their values, which is what you're telling me and what you've been describing you've been doing in this realm, which winds up sort of spreading out to like every area of your life. I mean, this is a worthy enterprise that people should be doing with regard to everything, not just doing it because, well, you have to have an iPhone to survive. You know, you have to have this device because that puts you on the side of all the advanced people. It signals all kinds of things about you rather than you making the decision of what you need, what's necessary, and what's valuable, you know, in your life. So I think that what you're describing is really something much more generalized. I'm glad you're doing it. I'm glad you're doing it with regard to the environment. It's made you see. And I think that there are a lot of things in life that we absolutely don't need. I mean, totally. We've been just, oh my God, I've been blinded to think that I can't function without this. I mean, just take teens, for example, you know, in social media. I mean, you know, the time in their life when they're sort of needing to develop a sense of self. And along comes this technology. Just when they're developing this very broad social awareness, this technology comes that has lots of bells and whistles that hooks them in. And I use the word advisedly because it's really designed to capture their attention, everyone's attention. And they go down this path of looking at others, actually looking at mostly fake others. Their attention, instead of their attention focused on within and what their needs are and how they're going to apply themselves in the world, they're captured to focus outward. It's really very hard for them to understand because of the pull of all of this, what a phony enterprise it is. And then when they do, it's like, oh my God, I can live without this. There are lots of movements going on now of, you know, being free of this stuff, technology-free days, technology-free weeks. I think that once they start grasping, they understand that they've just been sold this bill that is absolutely essential for them. And I think that might be the most glaring example in our one of the more glaring examples in our culture at the moment, especially for young people. But I think it's general. I think that there are just all of these things. We've been led down the wrong path about what's going to bring us satisfaction and how we create satisfaction. We have to do more in the way individually of creating it, because that's where it really comes from. It's certainly been my experience, certainly the message I gave in raising my kids, who I think are doing a fairly good job of living those values. I think it's one of the big challenges of our time to separate out all that clutter and all that noise for really the signals that are authentic to us and for us. So
yeah, I agree that this is the environment that we're getting you can tell what a system is, its values are by its results. We're getting what we act to get. And I think that one of the main reasons that we're doing it, what you were just talking about, is that a lot of people tell me, Josh, I'm just not as aware as you are. I don't really know all the information that you do. And their model in their head is that when they get the information, that they will act. Now, I will grant that, yes, you have to have some information, some knowledge. But as you said, everybody knows. The only people who don't know are people so remote in some village in Africa or wherever that they're not causing anything.
Right.
Everyone else, it's
right.
front page news, and it has been for decades, and it's on a more than weekly basis now, front page news. Everyone has that level of awareness, so they're over that threshold. Now they think if they know more, then they'll act. If they are aware more or more conscious, then they'll act. But they have it backward. Action leads to awareness 1,000,000 times more than awareness leads to action. People like to think the other way because that way they can just kind of run around their heads without doing anything. But when you actually act, the awareness shoots up. Why do I know a lot about the environment? I have some background in physics, so
You know the plastic doesn't dissolve.
Everyone knows that plastic doesn't dissolve. Everyone knows that when I was a child growing up in the 70s, we knew about global warming. We knew about sea level rise. That's not news. People don't really know how smoking causes lung cancer. And there's some doubt about it, I guess. But everyone knows enough that smoking is way down compared to before. There's lots of things that people don't really know, but they know enough to act. Everyone knows enough to act on the environment. They're not. If they do act meaningfully, not just like someone told me not to do straws, oh sure, whatever, I'll go without straws for a week. Not that. That's just compliance. If they act based on their values, then their values start becoming clear and start coming to the fore. And then they start realizing, oh, this value conflicts with that value. What value? Only when it's you in your life with your values and your behavior do these things come out. If you're trying to think, if you're doing a case study in business school, or you're reading about Plato's descriptions of values, that's this abstract academic stuff that's kind of nice. I mean, if you buy me a beer or a glass of scotch and want to talk to me about it, I'll talk to you about it. But the point would be to enjoy the scotch and enjoy the conversation.
Right. And the company, yes.
Well, the company would be messed up if we were talking about something so academic and not connecting with things. But when you're actually like, wait, I want clean air, and I want to see this person who lives far away from me, and I believe that the only way to get there is by plane, then what happens? This is where discovery, self-awareness, if you don't face that challenge, you're not raising your self-awareness. And if you shy away from that challenge, you're lowering your self-awareness. I've never heard a leader say, lowering your self-awareness improves your life. Why are we so hell-bent on believing that only by knowledge and facts and awareness and consciousness does behavior arise? I think this is going to go back to where we met, is education. I'm talking to someone who wrote A Nation of Wimps. We've led all these people with this academic, we've taught all these people, teaching and leadership overlap a lot to me, as does democracy. Here's a trend toward bubble form tests, standardized tests, away from recess, away from free play, away from kids figuring out with each other, how are we going to make this game work? Now there's like an odd number of players, we need an even number. Let's make a new game. And let's figure stuff out. We've moved away from that. Recesses are being canceled all over the place. Lunches are being, I think they're being canceled too.
And or reduced to a minimum.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that school gives you a great bunch of facts and a great bunch of analysis of those facts. But if you look at the behavior that it teaches, it's sitting in rows, it's compliance. It implies that if you just do stuff with your brain and ignore your body, then something will work out.
It's also not necessarily learned organically. I mean, you memorize it and it can fall out of your head, so to speak, later because it's not learned in a way that you're necessarily grasping.
We teach compliance and we get compliance.
Yes.
And then people are waiting for someone to be told to tell them what to do.
Which worked well for an industrial age, but we're way beyond that.
Not only,
I mean,
it
didn't work well for the industrial age
Let's say
because
it did.
so many people were left out of it.
Let's say it did work for
I
the
mean,
industrial age.
a minority of
In the
people
past,
went to school then.
let's say it did work. I'm not saying it did, but let's say it did. In the past several years, we're going, like, whatever we did, we're going more.
Yes, it's true.
Like, what worked then, if it did work then, we're so far past that now.
I know. I mean, I think
Of terms of compliance-based, factual recall-based education.
Yeah, I think everybody who's seriously involved in the school system realizes that the system is broken and it doesn't bear necessary relationship to the way people really learn. The beauty of play, of course, is that you get to figure stuff out. When you figure stuff out, you really learn it for life and you apply it in so many different situations.
And I won't feel bad if people right now click to Peter Gray's column in Psychology Today
Right.
and start reading that.
Neither of us will feel bad about that, right? Or go on the website of Sudbury Valley School and check out Dan Greenberg and letting kids learn by following their curiosity.
People today do not have that experience of learning by playing and learning by doing things themselves. It's increasingly adults telling children what to do.
Because here's the thing, I think. It's very counterintuitive to be in this world where so much is going on, so much is happening, there's so much to learn. None of us is going to learn it all, not in every single domain, so that you think, oh my God, I have to tie my kids behind to the chair, maybe drug them with Adderall or whatever they're giving kids these days, and get them to learn and get them through school. We'll take away play, we'll minimize lunch to however long it takes to wolf down a sandwich, and we'll keep them in school. But it's counterintuitive. That seems intuitive. You sort of hold on tight, you grip tight, and you just shovel the facts in. You hold the kids down, and you shovel the facts in. It's counterintuitive that if you loosen the reins and loosen the time constraints and let them freer to manage themselves and freer to play, that you're actually, one, building the brain, because play does generate new brain cells and makes the brain more plastic, which makes it much more responsive to new information and to coming up with creative solutions to problems. It's just counterintuitive that loosening the reins is going to lead to the result that you want, where people become eager to learn, where they follow their curiosity and spend hours involved in projects. It just doesn't seem to be the result that you're going to get. We've probably made some mistake in the way we teach cause and effect, for everybody to believe that you got to nail the kid to the chair and dose them with Adderall in order for them to learn all there is that needs to be learned these days.
And if anyone who's listening to this and who also agrees, as I do, that it does seem counterintuitive, because I grew up in a system that said, teacher has knowledge, student doesn't. Teacher gives knowledge to student will get knowledge, student will figure out what to do with the knowledge. If that seems intuitive to you, and it does to me, if you're my age, I'm 48 or younger, but the way that you're saying it's counterintuitive, I think you got a couple of years on me. If you feel like this is outrageous, if you feel like this is also counterintuitive, then you grew up in that system. And as much as you'd like to change that system, you're a product of that system. Whether you know it or not, you may see the problems with it, but you may not have experience with the opposite of that, or another system, which is where you learn by doing, where you learn by playing, where you learn by interacting with others. And if that's the case, you don't know what it can be like. And that's what I'm doing with the environment, is I'm just simply doing what the science, as I understand it, says there's a certain amount that if we pollute by this much, the earth can regenerate. If I produce carbon dioxide, there are trees and things like that that can, they can put it back into the system and so forth. If you keep it below a certain level, problems work out. Or they're not so much problems. So I do that. No one's doing it. Everyone's saying, well, there should be a law to make me do it, and then I'll do it. Other people should do it. But I'm just doing what, instead of the system that I grew up in saying, keep learning, and then the answer will become obvious, and then you should do it. And then what that answer says is other people should do it. Governments should change, and corporations should change. But that doesn't work, because all the people in government are doing the same thing. They're saying, well, the Senate is like, well, the president should do it. The president, well, I don't know what the president's saying. But like, people are not, everyone can point fingers at someone else, and no one's doing anything, because we've all lost, or we've never learned. We haven't had the experience of, oh, this is great. When I try things out, I learn and I grow, even though I make mistakes at the beginning. And so what you're describing, I think why you like what I'm doing so much is that it's getting people to do things and learn by doing. That's a big part of the opposite of what a nation of wimps is.
Right. So,
if I'm not misstating your book.
No. I think that you're right. And one of the things I do to get a whole generation of parents to connect with this very idea, because they're the ones who are gripping their kids tight and, nailing them to the chair and shoving Mandarin and all the other things they think will be good for their kids into their heads, or allowing other people to do all that. One of the things I do, I talk to parents a lot. I've been speaking around the country, although that magic carpet ride kind of has come to an end, that 10-year trajectory of giving talks over an idea as it entered the culture as Nation of Wimps did. But one of the things I do is I talk to parents and I say, hey, I just want you to think about how this might be the case. Just sort of sit back, close your eyes for a second, and think of your happiest time in childhood and their happiest moments in childhood. These are the parents who believe the world is terribly unsafe, so of course your kids can't go out and play and learn about the world on their own. Invariably, what the parents come up with is they're thinking of when they were 8 years old and they would get on their bicycles and spend all day on their bikes, and parents had no clue where they were for the day, and they would just be home for dinner in the evening. And invariably, that's one of the happiest moments, and it never detracted from anyone wanting to learn or gather information. They learned so much on their own. That is the only way I can get people to connect with this idea. It's not even 100% effective, because for the moment, it might help people understand that, oh yeah, there is another way. That one moment is not enough for people to counter the tremendous anxiety they have for their kids and their kids' future. For some, it lasts more than the moment that I talk to them, but I would say for the majority it doesn't. And that's because I wish I had more time to reinforce that message with them, or other people were reinforcing it to them. But there is that moment of insight where they grasp that, oh, it doesn't have to be done this way.
That's my technique in environmental leadership, is to find something that resonates with them, that's meaningful for them. And I have to go back, and most people protect it. When I ask people, what does the environment mean to you? When you think about the environment, when you're acting on it, what do you think about? Virtually everyone comes back with some protective answer of, oh, I don't know about that, or some dictionary definition of the environment. I have to support, what I believe that I'm doing when I say, well, I go back and forth a bunch of times before they come up with the apple tree at the end of the block that got paved over for a mall, or the time they swim with the dolphins, or if they grew up by the ocean, then it's usually water related. If they grew up in the mountains, it's usually mountains and streams. But there's something tangible, something visceral for them. But we've all been ambushed. We've all been criticized for hypocrisy and, oh, you're not doing enough. Florida's going to be underwater and you're worried about an apple tree in your past? Do you have any idea what's going on? Government has to do blah, blah, blah. But everyone has their own thing. If I can get that out, when I get that out, because everyone has it, everyone. I have no doubt that if I sit down with the CEO of Exxon, and the CEO of Exxon, in his heart, believes with every ounce of his being that the best way to solve the environmental problem is to dig more and get more fossil fuels and burn more fossil fuels. It's possible. He still doesn't want his fish. He doesn't want mercury in his fish.
His kids don't believe it, for sure.
It's him.
Yeah.
To say your kids care about something, that's not him. It's got to be him.
Right.
He still doesn't want their IQs to lower because there's heavy metals in their food.
Right.
He still doesn't want mercury in his own fish. And so there's going to be something environmental that he cares about. And when that's there, see, all the people saying like, oh, but he's a hypocrite or he should do this, it makes him more protective and more vulnerable. What I try to do, and I hope I do it, is to support people and point out that when they share these things, even publicly, people aren't going to say you're ridiculous. People aren't going to say you're a hypocrite. If you just simply share about an apple tree, everyone has their apple tree. If you listen to my first TEDx talk, I described the process of how to lead people through these things. But what you're talking about for education, what you're saying about me is what you also do. When you talk to people, probably you want to get them to change the educational system, or at least their involvement in it, or their involvement with their children. I'm doing something similar with their relationship with the environment, something equally important to them. I mean, kids are very important to you, but it's the air he breathes. That passion, that caring that's been suppressed and covered up by protection from fear, from anxiety, from guilt, from shame, that's when you start tugging at that string, that yarn, the whole sweater unravels of only when you actually, I mean, you really got to keep pulling at that string, but eventually it all unravels and you realize that however convenient fast food is, however much you think, well, this single mother in a food desert with 3 kids and 3 jobs, what can she do but get fast food? That's all a facade that we've built up around us in order to continue doing, even when kids play, even if they thought about, if these parents think back to when they were kids and they were playing outside all day, they probably didn't run outside. I mean, sometimes they did because they wanted to see their friends, but sometimes their parents had to kick them out. And there'd be, flow states, inspiration doesn't come out of the blue. You got to start doing stuff. Or one way to put it, on a different scale, I guess, love at first sight may happen. I haven't experienced it yet. It probably happens in some cases, but I have been in love, and it came from a relationship. It came from like
doing
things together. Yeah. Fights even and misunderstandings leading to resolutions and things like that. And that internally, finding out what we really care about as well has to come through things that we do, things that we try and it doesn't work. I mean, there's plenty of things that I do. There's plenty of things I've tried, they don't work, and I don't do. I should talk more about them because then people can see that it's not just I was like, let's go not flying and done. That came from other things. There just came from other things, which came from other things. And there were all these wrong turns that were some...
Well, they don't really have to be wrong turns. I mean, you could think of it as life is an experiment. You try some things and they don't work. Sometimes you follow. It takes longer to learn that they're not working till you see that they're cul-de-sacs or dead ends. And then, at some point you stop beating a dead horse and you move in another direction. I'm not sure we've given people enough of a sense that life is trial and error. So is dating. That's one of the messages I try to deliver to people, that life is really an experiment and that wrong turns are inevitable. That's partly how you learn, because we learn more from our failures than our
and school
successes.
teaches us the opposite.
Of course.
School says
you have to get it
one
right.
low grade and you're out.
And fill in the bubble and get it right.
Yeah.
And it's definitely that little bubble. I mean, it's definite and certain. We all know. I mean, we know.
And so if anyone lived through that system, if anyone who's filled out a Scantron form, probably the bulk of their education was, we're going to tell you the answer, and when you know the answer, you'll know what to do.
Right.
And if you were thinking to yourself, I know the answer, other people should do that X, or even if you know the answer and I should do X, but you're not actually doing it, you probably have not experienced the trying, you skin your knee a couple times for sure. You get laughed at by the other kids for sure. And that's going to happen with you if you try to act environmentally. But what happens when you get to the other side of that, when you really start living that way, is you start having fun with the people around you. You start connecting, you start solving problems with the other people collaboratively, and you develop relationships that are much deeper than just like, I know the right answer and here's what you should do. We're coming up on an hour. We could easily go for another
Right.
16, 32, or 48 hours.
Multiples of 16, of course. Right.
Something you said made me think of a couple topics. I want to give people a teaser because I have a feeling we'll keep doing this.
Okay.
I'm going to name a couple topics that have come up with you and me in the past that probably future conversations will touch on. We got into education, and I think we're going to come back to that a lot, and psychology of education. We almost talked about Lenore Skenazy and Jonathan Haidt, and I think that's going to talk about values and academics, the universities today of safe spaces and woke culture and things like that. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a future one. I'm sure that's going to get us talking about race and gender and sex.
All the taboo topics.
Yeah, and you talked about dating, and we've talked about dating, and I asked you permission to write about certain things in my column. I think that'll come up. What are some other topics that have come up? Food, I think, is going to be another one that comes up a lot.
Right? I don't know, my mind is a blank.
Okay, yeah, I just started thinking about this from some of the stuff you said. When you said dating, I thought, oh, that's what we talked about. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that and sex and intimacy and relationships along there. That's some stuff to come. I think it's like Hara and Josh talking. It's possible that people are like, who do they think they are that we should listen to them? But maybe people will listen to it.
Yeah, we've lived a little, done a few things, and have figured one or two things out, at least for ourselves.
And I find that talking to you, it's really exploring ideas that I think most times when I talk about these things, people get very opinionated. It shuts down conversation. And something about our conversations, in my experience, it's exploring and figuring things out as opposed to
a firm stance and a closed firm stance.
Yeah, or seeking controversy just to get people yelling at each other.
Right. Beyond that. I've
Right,
had enough of that in my life. I don't need any more of that.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll hit that anyway. We'll see.
Yeah, well.
All right, so that's the end of episode 1. We'll see what comes next. I don't have anything to wrap up with. Do you have anything to wrap up with?
No, just do things.